following case study is just a fantastic classic journey of taking you through to your first Ironman. All the expected challenges, all the ups and downs, what to do, what not to do, all the mistakes that come with training for this monster event. And this is an awesome story of Shelby, one of our TriVelo athletes who decided to commit to Port Mac Ironman. And unfortunately, as you'll hear in this story, that plan got thrown out the window last minute as she was really ready a few weeks out to race that race, and she had to defer and try and peak again 6 weeks later for Cairns Ironman. We just had Cairns Ironman over the weekend. What an epic event that is. What you think, Dad, is the toughest course on the Australian schedule. So we're going to go through Shelby's whole journey, what she struggled with, what most people can do struggle with in leading up to an Ironman, how we got through some of those challenges, and how she ended up having an unbelievable day, which is really hard to do for the Ironman race. So, Dad, we always talk about the Ironman is a different beast, but every time a TriVelo athlete comes through the Ironman phase, we get reminded, even though we don't need it, just how big a process it is. And for all our Ironman athletes that competed over the weekend, it's not the same as a half Ironman. It's not the same as a triathlon. It is literally double a half Ironman, which is hard enough. It is just an insane thing to train for and get your body ready for.
Oh, there's so much to unpack in Ironman, isn't it? And there's so many stories. And just one of the things we were talking about was you feel like you may not have nailed your race, and then you start talking after the race to other people and you think, oh, compared to what they did, I'm actually quite happy with my race now. When you get perspective, don't you, in different ways post-race. And look, going to your first Ironman is probably the hardest one to do, but it's probably the easiest because those who've done one and go back again know what actually happened previous. And the reason they go back is because they've probably left a lot out there and they want to rectify and improve upon what they previously did, or they had a great experience and they want to do it again and see how much faster they can go. So the first one, you kind of got the unknown, you're worried, but a lot of people do it. Can't be that hard, can it? There's thousands of people who seem to be doing Ironman each year, but really, when you go to prepare for the first Ironman, there's so many hurdles and so many boxes you have to tick before you actually get and wake up on that morning and then sort of say to yourself, well, I actually made it to the start line. And even in our little community of TriVelo athletes, we have so many stories of people, as you just mentioned in the opening. Shelby was meant to do a previous race and didn't even make the start line. And now she's lining up again to see if she can actually get her first race done. So, it is a classic event of endurance and it is the ultimate in triathlon, and doesn't mean to say you do sprint races and you're not really a real triathlete. That's not what I'm saying at all. But just to try and put this, whether you're an 8-hour competitor or whether you're a 17-hour competitor, they hurt a lot. One just hurts a lot longer for the day than the other one. It's tough to get to the start and feel happy about your preparation. And there's so many things that get put in front of you that derail your whole planning. And you just want the absolute best scenario, but that's kind of like 1% of the cases. And let's just dig into it.
Yeah, let's go through it in her own words. She said, 3/4 through the swim, she's going, I'm never doing this again. And then not even 24 hours after the race, she goes, I'm doing another Ironman. And that's just the up and down nature of the whole journey.
To be fair, that was one of the worst swims I've seen in a long. And I said that at Busso, and I'd never thought I'd be able to say that again so quickly. Busso and Cairns have been two of the worst swims I've seen in a long time. I've watched a lot of races around the world over the last 25 years, and I haven't seen conditions like that twice in the space of 6 months. And like when you think about adding 10 to 15 minutes onto your normal time across the board, I'm not talking about an individual here or there. I'm talking about the majority. We're not talking about the pros, obviously, but for the average age grouper who's trying to battle between 145 and 220, it just knocks them around so much more, and it takes so much out of you. You're there for longer. You're swimming harder because you're fighting such big waves and seasickness and swallowing so much water. Don't underestimate how much that affects your actual nutrition on the day, swallowing too much salt water. And you're burning so many calories that you have to really have a different nutrition plan post that event.
So let's get into it. Who is Shelby? She is a 26-year-old pilot, which is impressive in itself for her age, with an absolutely wild schedule. For training for an Ironman, you're in a different, as a pilot, you're in a different city every 2 to 3 days. So managing that training schedule and planning around that becomes very difficult just to stay on top of. Because you don't get this typical Monday to Friday schedule where you get the same thing every week, and that's hard for coach and athlete, but specifically the athlete, just to feel on top of things. And it can feel like training can get away from you so easily because you're just all over the shop. And I will say she just handled that whole part of the process brilliantly. But really, such a committed athlete. And she did such a good thing. She came to us with 11 months to go before Port Mac. She only started triathlon a year and a half ago, and decided to do the Ironman and gave herself 11 months to prepare, which is amazing. But I will say she started off the program essentially relatively injured from pushing too hard through a marathon, and she kind of ended up with shin splints from the marathon and had to be forced to take a break from running. And that was the first tough conversation, and we'll talk about the themes throughout this process. But in the Ironman process, you've got to put a lot of trust have a lot of trust between coach and athlete and program and athlete. And we had to have, the first challenging conversation where you say, we think you need to just give yourself some rest from running, and you can still get some fitness from bike and swimming, but you're just not getting anywhere with your running. You're sore, you're injured. And for someone that's the motivated athlete and the committed athlete, like you talk about, it's just so hard for them to hear. And when the full trust isn't established yet, because that just takes time, they kind of want to resist it. And it feels like you have to go backwards. And sometimes you do have to go backwards a little bit to, one step back to take 2 steps forward. But yeah, that's the first test of the trust in the coaching relationship to make that the right decision. But thankfully, she did trust that and took some time off, and she'll be glad she did, because when she came back, she was more pain-free and we were able to build up the running slowly, and she never looked back from there. And she just basically started PBing all her runs for the whole process right through to Cairns.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about that in a little bit more detail when we get onto the run in the actual race. But it, I've always known this theory that, if you're training for a triathlon, the run leg, you don't have to be for an Ironman, and that's the caveat there. For an Ironman, you don't have to be doing 400s on the track and 800s on the track. If you're doing enough high intensity on the bike and in the pool, where you're really stressing your cardiovascular system, you just need to get your body toughened, hardened for running. And that just means regularly running. And ideally, if you just ran at your marathon pace the whole time, you would be nailing that by the time you got to the race. Because what you do in training, if you're a person who runs 6-minute K pace in training for, say you did that for 5 years and you never did any other intervals, you'll be very good at running 6-minute K pace in a race. That's the example I would give. If you tried to run 5:30, you'd probably blow up, even though you're really fit, but you've never actually run faster. So the theory is, if you can pick a pace that you ideally want to run at and just keep doing that in training, you will build up a resilience, and your body will get adapted to that style of running for that pace. If you want to run faster, obviously you need to, stress the body to a point where you can run some sessions that are faster than that. So you get that overload optimization of the training program, and using the bike and the swim will also cardiovascularly wise make you be able to cope heart and lungs with the intensity of the run. But generally, she's proven our theory time and time again that if you just get strong and resilient as a runner, you'll be able to run well on race day. And it's not about you being fast on race day, because let's face it, you're running a marathon after you've already been out there for, the best person is going to be out there for already 5.5 hours if they swim an hour and ride 4 hours 30. That's 5.5 hours. So, who can run a really good marathon after 5.5 hours of quite high intense exercise, enduring exercise? So that's our theory, and she's just proven it again.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many times in the last 6 to 10 weeks, she just kept saying the sentence over and over, how easy running feels and how strong she feels, and just how the pace just feels so comfortable. And that comes from that building of strength. And there was definitely a threshold there that was crossed at some point 6 months plus into the program of really that endurance running, where she went from, feeling like she was gaining fitness to crossing that and feeling really fit, if that makes sense. And that happened in a few races and a few long runs where she's going, oh, whoa, I can run these paces extensively and I can run a half marathon PB in a 70.3 race in the lead up and feel absolutely unbelievable and run a 10K PB in the back end of that 70.3 just because of how strong I am. And that's actually what happened. And so, look, I'll go on.
I was just going to say, before you go on from that point, that just proves the theory. How do you do a 10K PB and obviously people would say when they're listening to this, well, you haven't run any hard sessions, so obviously your 10K PB is not going to be that high. But, to do it in the back of a half Ironman where you've already run 11K and you're doing your last 10K as your fastest ever, I just think that just, it's another piece of evidence to show you that you can still run really competently and where you want to, faster than you can do in training. Even though I said, if you spend a lot of time running the same, you'll run the same in races, but you can actually pick the pace up because you've got that resilience from all of the volume of running you've been doing. And we're talking, 30, 40, 50 Ks a week here. And that's kind of going to give you that resilience plus the intensity. Everybody bypasses what happens on the bike. It is VO2 threshold work that we're doing that gives that intensity so your body can cope with something that feels like it's harder than it should be.
And she's, through this whole process, I don't want to skim over the fact that she's dealing with every part of the process in triathlon that all beginners deal with, and specifically for her, she really struggled with the VO2 work on the bike. The whole bike process was brand new. She hasn't ridden a bike before. She's new to it all. The stuff around that we always talk about, riding to power, cadence, pressure on the pedals. For a new athlete, we can't underestimate how confusing that is and how hard it is to get right when you haven't been riding your whole life and you haven't learned how to change gears and keep pressure on the pedals. And she was really struggling for a lot of that starting 4 to 6 months she couldn't quite nail a VO2 session. That was super frustrating for her. For someone that's really diligent in everything that she does, she was just really getting down on herself about, some sessions she would almost hit it, but not be quite there. We felt like that some of the FTP tests were actually just a bit inaccurate. Something was going wrong. Something was missing between the tests and the actual sessions where she wasn't nailing them. And so she had to work through all that while still building up her running. So there's a lot of stuff you're trying to learn as a beginner athlete. You just have to trust the process, and this is what we go through. It'll all come. It'll all come together, but it does take consistent progression and just consistent work at it for it to eventually come together. And that's why you need to give yourself that time as well.
And also, Jordy, you talked earlier about her particular job, which is really shift work. And let's be blunt about this. Tuesday could go 18 hours, Wednesday could be off, Thursday could be 6 hours, Friday could be you've got 1 hour to train, Saturday you've got none. You don't even know until your schedule comes out. And, majority of people have a really clear Monday to Friday work where they work 8 till 5 or whatever. But there is so much impact when you've got a schedule like this. And a lot of the time you're actually awake at night and you're not getting enough sleep. And so that impacts everything. You're not eating properly because you have to be super organized to make sure that you're ticking all the right boxes. And look, to become a pilot at that young an age is pretty impressive. So she's obviously a talent. And a very organized person. So that's shone through because she managed to schedule everything so that she didn't really miss a lot of training. She's done an exceptional job at this, I feel. And that's an example to everybody that, even with the weirdest working hours, as long as you're organized, and that's what plan, prepare, perform is all about. The planning part is, well, when am I going to train with the schedule I have? And if you're not paying attention to that, the only outcome is you're going to miss sessions regularly. And I think that's the thing that you were so much proud of her for doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that if she wasn't as planned as she was, there's no way she would have gotten the results she did. And she just had to be with her schedule and really inform us of what was coming up so we could make informed decisions for her programming. But yeah, you have to be that diligent to have that kind of schedule and train well for an Ironman. So that was definitely a key part of the process all the way through. And she also, another thing she did really well, which is just good for any preparation, is really making smart decisions around your practice races. And so she ended up aiming for an Olympic race in Feb. It was actually Husky Tri, so it's kind of an Olympic. It's 1K swim, 60K bike, 10K run, so longer bike than normal. And then Geelong 70.3 as a build-up. But this also... they were really good lead-up races and good timing out from Port Mac. It brings up more interesting conversations around what's the goals for them. And the Husky Tri was a really good confidence booster because she hadn't raced for so long. she really needed to get back into a triathlon and experience a race again and put together. And that was a real encouraging performance all around, because she just didn't know how she was going to perform in a 10K off the bike. She didn't know how she was going to go in a race environment, sticking to power for the first time. And it was a really great result all around. But she was still had a long way to go with her fitness. And then come to Geelong 70.3, again, it's a great point for people to realize that for her, she really had high expectations on herself. And these are all things I want you to touch on in a second, but it's a classic conversation we have constantly with athlete and coach of, is this your B race or is this your A race? Because if it's not your A race, you need to adjust your expectations. And of course, every athlete wants to do as well as they can in the race, and we don't reject that. We're not saying turn up to a race and don't try. That's never the case. If you're pinning a number on, you're going as hard as you possibly can in the race. If you're going to go race, we're racing properly. But you just have to have the right expectations around what form you'll be in and what you could possibly achieve, because we haven't trained for that specific race and we're not peaking for that race. And we had some great conversations around, it was constant back and forth of, no, I want to do really well at this race. And it's you can do as well as your form is right now, but we haven't trained you for this. We could have trained you for this in the last 8 weeks, but that would take away from your Ironman training. So which one do you want? And it's a to and fro that, of course, you've got your friends and family there. You know, you're putting pressure on yourself to perform well. You want to beat your last 70.3 time. They're all natural things that you want to achieve, but they're all not going to help you specifically with your Ironman goal. And yeah, your thoughts on that kind of conversation that comes up all the time.
Yeah, and I'm pretty direct with the athletes that we coach. And, you know, if you give the athlete the reason why, then they'll be on board with it. I think that's true in anything you're talking about, whether it's training session or resting, if you give the reasons why. And so when you break it down, okay, so you've got say Geelong's March and Port Mac is May. And so if you wanted to really make Geelong your equal to Port Mac, there's your first mistake, because if you do that, what happens 2 weeks before Geelong? You have to start your taper. And then you've pushed yourself so hard at Geelong, you might need a little bit more recovery. So therefore, the week you have recovering might extend into 10 days. So in fact, the preparation for that Geelong race has cost you nearly 3 weeks. In that preparation for the big one, the Ironman in Port Mac in May. And so that is a reason why you would think, oh, maybe I'll just do a little taper and I'll be happy and satisfied with whatever I can do at Geelong will be good enough. And as long as the athlete's on board with that and you've discussed that, and if they're still saying adamantly, no, I want it to be my best race, then that's when you're going to have a really serious discussion about this will impact Port Mac. And as long as you're okay with the consequences, you may be 5 or 10% down because you've missed possibly a week and a half of really good preparation for Port Mac because of what you want to do at the Geelong race. And you, as a coach, we can only say, okay, here's the consequences. Are you okay with that? And the athlete will go, well, no, not really. I want to do well at Port Mac as well. And so, you know, you're giving the athlete the decision making, and if they're okay with that, and then normally they're not because they're so competitive, but you've had that discussion. So,
yes.
So, you know, that's one of the key things that I'm adamant at, and I've learnt that I have to have that discussion. Otherwise, it really comes back at Port Mac and they'll go, oh, I thought I would do better than that. And then you'd have to have this discussion, well, because of what you did leading up to your previous race where we tapered for longer and recovered for longer, because you wanted to make that an A race, the form you're in March is different to the form you'll be in May or September in any given year. So if you're preparing for an event that's 6 months away or 12 months away, if at the 3 month mark, the 6 month mark, or the 9 month mark, you'll be in different form. So the expectations that you would be able to perform at your maximum that you would expect you were doing in, say, November, but you're doing a race in March, that's just plain wrong. You're a better athlete after having a build-up that's designated to a longer point than a shorter build-up. So that's an expectation you have to drill into the athlete, that, you know, you'll be at the best form you can be in March, but it's going to be different. It's not the form you'll be in 6 months later. You'll be in much better form because you've had longer to train and prepare. And if they don't understand that concept, then you're still battling with the whole discussion. And they're the things I'm nailing with the athlete is why is this going to be an issue when we get to the next race? Because it does impact your training build.
To her credit, she listened and she trusted against her will, and she'll probably laugh at that because she'll probably remember those conversations. But it brings up an interesting point for us because I remember having some conversations with you around it, as we do with all our athletes, and we're just always discussing form people are in and races that are coming up. And for us, the temptation would be to try and help the athlete feel a little bit better, and in those last few weeks do some more specific 70.3 race intensity training sessions. But that takes away from the Ironman preparation, and it's only 9 weeks or so between Geelong and Port Mac, and so we're doing Ironman specific work. We're gearing our training around that. And yes, it would be tempting to placate the athlete a little bit and get them in 70.3 form and have some confidence. And in that situation, we have to back ourselves and go, no, we think you'll perform fine in the 70.3 anyway, because you're getting super fit for Ironman. But we just don't want to waste any weekends doing 70.3 specific work, because that's not your A race goal. Your A race goal is you want to perform best on race day at the Ironman, and you want to be in your best shape. So of course the week out we do the right things. We do some testing, we do some time trials. You're doing endurance work anyway, so it's not totally different. And that helps inform us of a good race plan for race day. But it takes a bit of backing ourselves, Dad, and going, trust this. And I said to you, I feel like she's going to go great anyway, because her fitness is just becoming so good. But you also can't promise that to the athlete, because we haven't actually done the kind of race ready work where we could guarantee that, if that makes sense. But I will say, she was concerned she really wanted to beat her 70.3 time, her first one, which was 6 hours. And I said to you, she'll beat that, no worries. If that's her only goal, then that's okay. And it turns out she blew it out of the water. She did 5:08, so it was a 52-minute PB or something around that area. And that's because you're getting insane fitness from the Ironman training, which is really great. And to her credit, she blew my run expectations out of the water. And I set up quite a conservative race plan because we weren't sure how she was going to put together her first half marathon off the bike again in this prep. And she went out as conservative as I asked, and then just blew that out of the water, and we were too conservative in that run plan. So that just backs up what we were saying again.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there. And when you're training for an Ironman, you don't do the intensity for 70.3, but you've got that aerobic fitness from those long sessions. So you've got that resilience as a runner because you've been doing 2.5 hour runs. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're just specifically training for Olympic distance and a half Ironman, if you're a 140 runner or 150 runner, you're not doing many runs over that time. Whereas if you're training for a marathon, you're doing lots of time over 2 hours 20, 2 hours 30. So you are actually building a lot more aerobic capacity to do well in shorter events, even though you don't have the intensity. And I think the same on the bike. You're so strong after you're doing 4 5-hour rides. I mean, if you were just specifically training for 70.3, you'd be doing 2 3-hour rides, 3 hour 30 rides. So that longer we know that from all of our research from all our athletes, that if you can get longer endurance sessions on your body as a runner and as a rider, you're going to cope with the duration of the event. It's just the intensity you need to get good at. And so the other aspect that we really want our athletes is to always feel like confidence in the program and confidence in their training, confidence in their preparation. And so a poor result is not going to help that. So it is a concern that we let athletes do these big profile races as a build up for, we could just say no racing. We'll just do our own mock races. And you don't have to pay the money. You don't have to go and fly there. You don't have to pay the accommodation, the entry. You just do your own, but it's not the same. It's not the same conditions. You have traffic where you have to stop. Whereas in a race like this, everything's open and the road's closed, and you're in a race environment, so it is a better outcome all round to do these practice races. And it's a key thing for your Ironman. There's no doubt about it in my mind, and it gives the athlete confidence. And when she nailed that 70.3 at Geelong, and most of the athletes are doing the same. it's just you just trust the process more because far out, how good did I run today? You're actually shocking yourself. You're going, I just felt fantastic. And if the opposite occurs and that's a bad thing, because you just all of a sudden question everything. You're questioning, and there could be a reason why it didn't happen. But 9 times out of 10, if it's part of the journey, and as long as you've got that expectation, which I said 10 minutes ago, that, you know, you aren't in the same form as you would be when you're getting to the end of your A race. And so as long as the athlete's on board with that, and they have, as you said, just break 6 hours, well, that's a no-brainer. She's going to do that. And you know, she absolutely smashed it. So, you know, straight away, she's already won. You know, she's won her goal. And then she's PB'd a half marathon in a triathlon again. You know, and I think the second 10K was her PB 10K. So, so there's just so many things happening that she's just I can't wait for the next training session. I can't wait for the race for the Ironman. And so they're really good things to do. And it's part of that confidence building, and the mental side of racing and training is so undervalued. And
the confidence
you can do all the training sessions you like, but to get some feedback that's so positive in a race environment, and that's why you and I push our athletes to try and find as many little other races. Like we do some time trials on a local road here. We've got the local people doing the time trials, and I send people to obscure events just so they've got this competition and they get feedback about where their form is. And I think that, you know, get and practice your execution in races that don't count for anything for your A race.
That I just went through the exact experience the last few months where I'm living in Indonesia and the heat and humidity is just out of this world, and I just cannot get close to my typical race paces in practice training for a half marathon coming up. And I really started to say to you, I know it's the heat, I know it, but you're still starting to doubt yourself, and you're going, but is it all the heat, or am I just not as fit as I think I am? Like, maybe I just can't run these paces. And then I was back in Australia over the weekend in some cooler temperatures, and it was definitely the heat, because suddenly I'm running 10 to 12 seconds faster per kilometer in a training session. And that's why these little things are so important, why we schedule them in. That mental confidence is just so vital. So for Shelby, she then kicked on for a preparation for Port Mac. She was looking really good, and a few weeks out, her plans get completely derailed. She gets assigned some international duty with work, and there is just no way out of it. And she cannot race Port Mac and has to be overseas. So not only is she, and in her words, she said, it's so deflating because I have woken up every single day for the last 11 months and thought, what am I doing today to best prepare for the Ironman? You know, which just shows the level of commitment. But everything around her planning, her schedule, her life, her work. And I was thinking before about the travel. You know, we think about how hard it is to lug your bike to a race. You know, she's doing that every 2 or 3 days, carrying her bike with her for work so she can keep training on the bike and packing it up and putting it down, packing it up. She must be the biggest expert at packing the bike out of anyone.
I don't think people realise how hard that is. You're not just packing a case to go to work. You're packing a bike every day to go to work. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So the dream is suddenly thrown out the window a little bit, and she's going, what do we do? What do I do? I've turned my life around for this event. And also, part of the Ironman process is you start to lose your social life and balance. And not just, you know, she enjoys training with friends, and we had to really, in the last 10 weeks, I just said, look, I know you love this social stuff, but this is the period where you've got to start cutting more of that out. And we might be able to fit in some every now and again, but this is race ready phase now, and she accepted that. And but it also cuts into just your social balance because you're so exhausted from these big sessions, you can't really go to social events with friends. And so the point is, all this commitment for then the race to be kind of taken away from you, it's just so deflating. And so the decision was, okay, can I defer it? Can I and am I willing to enter Cairns if I can't defer it and pay the money again for another race and rejig everything? And what do we do then? Do we have a break from training? I've just done a huge race ready Ironman phase. I'm ready to peak in the next few weeks. And she was starting to really absolutely fly. And that was the decision. She just said, no, I've trained this much for an Ironman. I want to do it. But now she's actually overseas for 7 to 10 days. And so that interrupts your training in itself for the Ironman phase. And so the decision was, okay, let's just take a little bit of a break. Once you get back from that overseas, you've got 6 weeks again to get yourself Ironman race ready. You're already right now Ironman race ready. You're as fit as you could be. So rather than trying to continue for another 8 weeks, it's too long to be in a race ready phase and to try and peak. So we just backed it off a little bit and just went a little bit shorter, really backed off the volume for a couple of weeks while she went overseas. And then just picked up where we left off with in that last 5 to 6 weeks and peaked again for Cairns. And that was just another classic process of, we've spoken about this before with anyone training for their first Ironman, is it takes every single Ironman race ready session for it to click. It won't click on your first one. It won't click on your second one. And for a lot of athletes, it doesn't click till their 6th or 8th one. And for her, it was a classic case of the last couple of sessions leading into Cairns, it finally all just clicked and she really understood what we were saying. And the bike sessions just started to feel really strong. And one of the key ones was a 35k mara pace run off the bike where she just felt on top of the world, so much so that she was naughty and did a extra 3 kilometers and ran 38.8 kilometers, almost close to a marathon. And this is only a few weeks out from Cairns, which as coaches we're not happy with, essentially doing a marathon in your training. But she just said she felt so good, she wanted to prove she could get that close. So we can't argue with it, and the truth is in the numbers. She ran unbelievable, so and didn't get injured.
Don't forget, Christian Blumenfeld ran a marathon before he won the
Kona, exactly.
Kona Ironman, and not that we say that that's what you should be doing. No, that's not what you should be doing for everybody listening to this. Yeah. But yeah, certainly, I think the way you guys handled that, it was really good to watch, and I was blown away by the fact that she had such resilience that let's just reset and again trust in the process, and got to a really good level of fitness. And as you said, you just can't hold that for 8 to 10 weeks. You've got to actually give yourself a reset, and I think that was a really good thing, and it was almost like a blessing in disguise, almost, because I think that sort of pressure kind of, now she really understood that I really do want to do this event, even though she did want to do it before. When it's taken away from you, all of a sudden you get more desire to, am I ever going to get to do this damn event? And we always talk about roadblocks, and that's just one of them, and there's still a couple more to come. So tell us what happened next.
Basically then get to, has a really good race ready phase, and then gets to 9 days out from the race, is really ready to do her final testing and taper, and ends up having to go to the doctor, and then has to have emergency surgery on the Saturday, goes to the doctor on Thursday or Friday. Straight away they book her in for emergency surgery on the Saturday, a week out from the race, and she just calls and goes, I can't believe this, but this is the surgery. She's been Googling, how does it all work? ChatGPT, what's the recovery? Trying to ask the doctors, I've got an Ironman next week, and then the doctor's saying to the other doctor, the consultant, what's the recovery? She's got a triathlon next week, and she's going, it's not a triathlon, it's an Ironman. It's not trying to convince them of what the enormity of the event is next week. It's not a little thing I'm trying to recover for. This is an Ironman, and the level of stress that comes with that, just insane. And once again, is the race derailed again? I'm having emergency surgery where you're under general anesthetic. What's the recovery going to be? Can I possibly race? My whole tape is interrupted. I don't get to do my last test now, which is kind of the best part of the confidence booster because it shows how fit you are. Just what a roadblock to be thrown in front of you.
Yeah, and you have to actually account for these things, and if you don't, it's to your detriment. And so this
is on the extreme end, to be honest, of what can be thrown at you. But yes, You're right. We always say anything can be thrown at you. Yep,
and coming from a cooler climate to a warmer climate, if you don't allow for that, just as the example you gave from Bali coming back to Melbourne, you're a different athlete in the space of 7 days. It's nothing to do with your fitness, zero to do with your fitness. It's to do with the environment. And for those who dismiss that, they're on the wrong program. And to have surgery is another factor that has to be accounted for. It can't be dismissed. And I always laugh if you ever go to the doctor and they say, oh, do you do any exercise? And you say, oh, yeah, I do triathlon. And majority of people, I'm being general here, really don't know what's involved in that. And, oh yeah, you do a bit of exercise, a bit of riding, a bit of swimming, a bit of running. They just don't understand, if you're a cyclist and you're doing, endurance events, Grand Fondos that are 150K, 200K, marathons that are 42K, and endurance, I don't think the average person understands how
Gravity
impacting
of
that is in.
yeah.
Yeah. And so, you should be right to exercise. This is not just any exercise. This is an event that's going to take all of my might to get to the finish of. And I've just had surgery. Is this okay? And you're seriously asking that question. It's not a joke. You are asking for some really good advice here. And unfortunately, unless they know what is involved, then they're just going to give general advice. I think you should be okay to exercise.
Yeah, and the advice was, recovery can be anywhere from 2 to 7 days, depending on the person, depending on how bad it is, and that doesn't really help either. And so we just had to take it day by day and go, we can't change anything. You have to do this. You have to take the pressure off yourself to forget the taper, forget sessions. Your whole goal is recovery and just see how your body is next week. And literally each day waking up and going, am I recovering? Am I resting? Can I train? Can I be on the bike? Can I run? And it was 3 days of recovery. Definitely really mentally trying to force herself to be good more than physically, but each day was fractionally better. I went for a first run on the Tuesday or Wednesday, I think, super light, and then first ride on the Wednesday or Thursday, and just didn't feel great. But each day we just said the legs might come back more and more. And at that point, when you've trained 11 months for almost 12 months now for an Ironman, and you're literally down to the wire of whether your body's going to be ready or not, it's mentally that's so hard, and it takes, again, a lot of resilience to get through that. But these are the challenges that in different forms do pop up. And then to get to Saturday and be like, okay, it's seeming okay, but now we've got an Ironman tomorrow, and how is my body going to respond in an Ironman? It's a big unknown, and it's hard to have full confidence going into a race with that cloud looming over your head.
Imagine the thought process yourself, Jordy. If you've got to get to Port Mac and you've had to cancel it, and now you think you've done everything right to Cairns, and then it looks like you might have to cancel it again, and twice in a row in the space of 8 weeks. I think it'd be pretty demoralising. So I think she should. She deserves a medal for actually getting to the start line after what she's done over that period. And we've spent a lot of time talking about that. And the reason is we want to tell every athlete out there that it's just not smooth. The preparation, if you think it's going to be smooth and you think you're a very organised person, then think again. There are so many things that are going to be thrown at you. And this is the measure of the woman or the man as how you deal with it. And if you can do this in the preparation planning phase, it doesn't matter what happens on race day, you're going to be such good capacity to deal with anything that's thrown at you, such as a crap swim like was presented to every athlete who started at Cairns. And this is what it's all about. This is the practice things you do so that when it comes to race day, you've got the mindset. And of course you've got the fitness, but it's the mindset that when something's thrown at you, you lose your mind, you lose the plot. And they're the things that we're trying to instill in our athletes is, just deal with it in a calm and thought-provoking process that how am I going to get around this? I've just lost all my nutrition. What do I do now? The nutrition that I wanted, that they said I had on course, Morton Black, wasn't available at half of the aid stations. And that's happened to one of our athletes, was relying on that, gets to every aid station and there's none available. What am I going to do about that? So you've got to have this thought process about navigating things that are going to happen to you. So that's why we spent this time. So we do talk in these case studies a lot about the actual event and how well they performed, but we don't talk a lot about getting to the start line and the things that you have to do so well, so diligently. So now we've got to the race day.
Yeah, and look, the race plan, you kind of go, here's our normal procedure, but for you, we've got, here's what we think you can do. If nothing else had gone wrong or anything, here's what you're capable of. Here's what all your data and your training sessions show you can do. But then we have to count for Cairns is such a tough course, and it's a tough course on a bad day of conditions. It's a tough course in good conditions, but Sunday was forecasted for really choppy water and really quite strong headwind, meaning majority of the bike was into a headwind because there's an extra little loop, and that extra loop was into a headwind. And so for everyone, that makes it a slower day. So, okay, we have your ideal race plan, but then we have what the conditions are for the actual day, which is now this is kind of plan B, and this is what we're kind of predicting. And then we have to say, but also there's plan C, which is your body just might not be ready now because of this surgery and because of these last minute things. And if that happens, that's going to derail your day, and you just have to expect that that is an option. Ideally, that doesn't happen, obviously. Ideally, you get through tomorrow and everything goes smoothly, but you can't mentally ignore that fact that that might be an option, and it might be a completely different day to what you're anticipating. That's quite hard to hear, but you have to say that, because if you pretend it's not an option and then suddenly your body's you've been in general surgery, anesthetic surgery a week ago, and your body just can't cope with it, suddenly your day is just about absolute survival, and all the training paces and plans we planned for are out the window for an Ironman.
I think it's a really good point, Jordan. If you ignore that and bury your head in the sand, you're not going to allow your body and your mind, more importantly, to cope with whatever happens. And I think you're doing yourself an injustice if you try to say, nothing's going to happen to me, I'll be fine. That's what planning the race strategy is about. If this scenario happens, this is my plan B. And if I feel really bad, I've just got to run slower or ride slower or swim slower. Mm-hmm. And if you're not on board with that, then you're setting yourself up for failure, I think. So I think Shelby did a great job of listening to that advice. And in the end, it ended up giving her more a conservative approach so that she could actually really do well in the event.
Yeah, and we just said you have done everything you can. You have trained the best possible. You have left no stone unturned. So therefore, you can't ask any more of yourself. And if your body gives up tomorrow, that's not on you. That's just going to happen. But it didn't, and the day turned out well. And thankfully, in tough conditions, it was a rough swim for everyone, and she did not enjoy the swim or the bike ride very much at all. She was really hoping to enjoy the bike ride, and it wasn't a great day on the bike because it was a slower day for everyone. But the swim, yes, she was outside the range, but so was everyone, and that's always funny for us watching and tracking everyone live. We can see that everyone's swimming slower, and that's a big lesson for an athlete is, don't come out of the swim and panic if it's slower, because you don't know how everyone else did either, and that's something we try and ram home. But everyone was slower, so we're watching going, okay, the swim was poor, plus we have people on the ground telling us that the conditions are crazy, so that's everyone. And then you watch the bike, and we have the full range of what would be the A result or the B result, and she dipped under 6 hours, which on a good day she could be a 5:30, 5:40 rider, but with a strong headwind like that, it's going to be the lower range, and the lower end of the range was to crack under 6 minutes, and she did that, and then gets to the run. And we had a conservative range of 5:50 to 6 minute pace. And we knew that she's capable of, and she'd done that 38K off the bike in training at 5:45 pace. And we knew she's capable of that, but it was too risky to go for that. And we needed to go more conservative. And to her credit, she blitzed the run and averaged 5:44 pace, and came home in that marathon just absolutely flying. And honestly, to put all that together after that day and the preparation and everything that happened just to get to the start line, she was grateful for. But for it to all go as smoothly as that, and to guts it out like that, and to finish off with that kind of marathon, 4:02 marathon, a PB marathon inside the Ironman, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, and that's the fun fact is that we push this on our podcast a lot. If you do well in the swim and the ride, you will have equally a good opportunity to run the way you want to. And for the majority of the athletes from the TriVelo camp, we had probably 9 out of the 12 have the runs that they wanted to, which is a very high proportion, really. And we actually had a person negative split, Fiona Mann negative splitted, which I digress from what we're talking about with Shelby, but that is pretty impressive. An athlete in their 50s can run 4:45 pace, 4:50 pace.
I think there is a case study coming on Fiona for
3
that
hours
reason.
45, and yeah. That's not to take away from Shelby. It's just an example of, if you do things well, this is what you'll be able to do. And I think the fun thing is when you are still running past people who are walking, you just feel so inspired and so motivated, and And I think that's the bit that you want to experience. And if you haven't experienced that yet, that's what your goal should be for the next time you've done it. And the story that she's got is, obviously I can do better. I want to beat this. And that's her mentality literally straight afterwards, far out. It was really hard. Yes, it was hard, but the way I ran, now I know that I can ride better, and obviously I can swim better because the conditions will never be like that. And the ride always gets a little bit of a rough deal at Cairns, because you actually do an extra section into a headwind, which normally most courses around the world you start and finish at the same spot, and so you've got equal time into the headwind and tailwind, but you start 30 to 40k away from the finishing point. So you're doing 2 loops out and back, and then you do an extra into the headwind, which means the bike time will be so much slower than any other Ironman that you've ever done. So that absolutely changes. And if you're only dealing with times, then Cairns, you can only be compared with Cairns. So I think overall it was a really good story of really someone with resilience and great planning and determination and willing to trust the process and be on board and being open to anything and just trusting that if I do have this race strategy with plan A, B, C, and D, I can choose to select which one I can do on the day, depending on how I feel. I'll get the outcome that I want, and I think she nailed that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was an awesome story. And then I do want to touch on the 9 out of 12 run athletes thing, because we don't want to shy away from ever. Whenever an athlete doesn't run the way we want, we go straight into it and we dig deep and go, what's happened here? And when you're watching on the tracker, it can either be something completely unexpected, or it can be just a blow up, or it can be something that's a little bit harder to dig into. But we looked at our athletes, and one of the runners was coming from an injury, so the run wasn't expected to run as they wanted, and that's okay. One was Roland, who was in his pro debut as an Ironman, and we'll do a whole episode on this with him and dissect it and just talk about our learnings as coach and athlete there, because if you listen to the episode pre, he was really, really had high expectations for the race, and so we want to break down really what happened for him, and he's been extremely, quite gracious in defeat in his race, and it was self-defeat because he's competing with himself, but we can't wait to dig into that one and give our thoughts about what happened for his Ironman. And then one last athlete, which is really interesting, and we'll dig into this in another episode, is it's quite hard to figure out what went wrong, because sometimes you look and you straight away can go, okay, something went drastically wrong with the nutrition. That was a problem. Something went wrong with the execution, either on the bike or the swim, or the start of the run, and that's what led them to run poorly. But this athlete is quite interesting, where nothing seemed to go wrong. All the training added up to X paces on the day. All the bike and swim data was as expected, and they had no nutrition problems, and they couldn't run the way they wanted. And so we're digging right into that with that athlete, and that's part of the learning process is going, what do we need to improve here to get this process right? So it's important to acknowledge all those things, and that's what we think good coaching and learning is about.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And look, in that scenario, and I've had a bit of a dig into it, which that's the thing that I really want to find out as a coach. I want to learn from experience, and if the day I think that I know everything is the day I should really give up coaching, because you should be learning about every scenario. And my conclusion already is that it's just not one thing. And I've said that many times on our podcast. It's a combination of many things that can actually derail the most important part, which is to get the run right. So yeah, I've already seen some things that little bit here, a little bit there, times 7. And then
adds up.
And then you've got the end result. So yeah, I'd really like to share that in another episode. Actually, it'd be a good one.
Yeah, for sure. And what we love is when you use data and you have the training data and the racing data, and the way we go about it is you always find the answer. When you dig deep enough, you always do find the answer, which is the exciting part. So that's it for this case study, a really big one, but this was big congratulations to Shelby for nailing this first Ironman. What an absolutely epic journey. I'm sure every listener will be able to sympathize with the amount of things that went wrong there and the resilience she showed to get through it. So what an absolutely epic journey, and we can't wait for future updates on how she goes in her future Ironman journeys, considering she wants to do another one. So congratulations, Shelby. And if you want your own help with Ironman or 70.3 or any distance, you can go to trivelocoaching.com.au, apply apply to get coached with us there, as you just heard about how our experiences work. A reminder that we coach athletes from all around the world, not just Australia. We have coaches around the world and athletes around the world, all competing successfully across all distances. So if you want to get coached, we have an 8-week guarantee that if you don't improve in the first 8 weeks, it's your money back. So go to trivelocoaching.com.au and sign up to apply to get coached there. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.